What am I holding here? This is a Gibson Baritone Explorer. It's the first Gibson I ever bought, first new Gibson. But I can no longer buy a new Gibson in Singapore. Indeed, in one of the richest cities, one of the richest countries in the world, Singapore, you can no longer buy a new Gibson. And the reason for that, once you examine it, takes you down a very interesting path. And when you go down that path, you find out that certain iconic American and European music-related brands are no longer American, are no longer European. Let's get right into it. So hi everyone, welcome back to the Ministry of Guitar. I'm Utkarsh Mohan, coming to you from Singapore. As always, if you like what I'm doing, please do like, subscribe and share. And if you want to go beyond the world of guitars, there's always my podcast. Now, there is an important bit of housekeeping to do before I get into the topic of this video. I really want zero xenophobia. I know it's not possible. In the comment section, you'll always have some xenophobia, but it's important. So I'm going to make an important distinction. I'm going to make a distinction between the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party in mainland China, the People's Republic of China. I'm going to make a differentiation between them, and I'm going to make a differentiation with overseas Chinese, the kind overseas Chinese people who settle in Malaysia or indeed Singapore. I am rather not fond of the former. I come from India. China invaded India in 1962. They tried again in 2020. You can understand why. But on the other hand, when it comes to the overseas Chinese, here in Singapore, in Malaysia, I could not be more fond. I have so many friends. And of course, Singapore was built by a great overseas Chinese man called Lee Kuan Yew. So please understand the differentiation. And when I'm talking about the Chinese ownership of certain iconic American properties, I'm referring to the overseas Chinese. Just making this distinction here so that it's clear. But regardless, please no xenophobia. I'm not very fond of it. Now, the story begins actually 100 years ago. And actually, I read about it in this book. This is a person you may not have heard of. And what does this have to do with guitars? What does this have to do with Gibson? You may ask me, but bear with me. It's an interesting story. This person, Robert Kuok, who is still alive, he's 100 years old, was born in very close to where I stay. I live in Singapore. There's a small Malaysian town just across a little tiny strait to Malaysia. He was born there, an overseas Chinese. And this guy was born 100 years ago, so you can imagine he grew up during World War II, etc. He went on to become one of Asia's richest men. I know today the Ambanis and the Ambani wedding is dominating everything, but Robert Kuok is one of the OG richest men of Asia. He lives in Hong Kong now. And he formed like this major conglomerate, do everything from, he was called the Sugar King, they do commodities. The Shangri-La Hotel where Trump and Kim Jong-un met is also started by him, so a lot of concerns. So the Kuok family is what we're going to talk about, and we're going to get to the world of guitars very soon. We have Robert Kuok, who's of course the patriarch. We have Koon Hong Kuok, I think his first cousin once removed. And then we get to his son, Meng Kuok, and that's where the music connection begins. So remember, this is a huge conglomerate. So you've got Meng I think he turns about 22, 23 years old, and they acquire, for Meng to manage, Singapore's one of their oldest retailers, Swee. I've mentioned Swee very often. I went to their new store recently on one of my videos. I wouldn't mind trying a heritage, because I've heard so much about them.
I think you should. Yeah,
but I guess they'll probably have something in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You should try. Kim Fields, although they say that the custom shop heritage has heritage self-made pickups.
Okay, so maybe we'll try that out in the room. When I was 18 years old, I bought my first guitar of Swee Brass Pasa. It's just closed down last week. That's going to be another video I'm going to make about it. So he acquires Swee. And together with Swee, he starts creating this significant mega conglomerate of musical brands. And I'm going to open it up for you. So there's a company called BandLab. Now here's the thing. I know it's supposed to be big. I don't really know how many people use it. I haven't heard anecdotally anyone using, but it seems to be rather large. So he creates this conglomerate. It's called BandLab. Swee, the Singapore retailers acquired, but then what else is acquired? Heritage guitars. Yes, the original Gibson factory. Harmony guitars. Guitar.com. Enemy. Uncut. So many of these brands that we are actually familiar with, whether they are media organizations related to music, whether they're guitar companies, it's all under BandLab. I think now they have combined it and called it Caldecott Music Group. Caldecott is actually an area in Singapore. So all of these brands are actually, they're no longer American, they're actually under a Singaporean company, under Kuok, under Meng Kuok. So it's quite ironic, right, that you have these iconic brands, right, these global brands that are actually owned and housed right here in Singapore. I mean, when I sit and talk about guitars here in Ministry of Guitar Singapore, I feel quite far removed from the American world, because most of the people who talk about electric guitars and Gibsons and PRSs, etc., are either in the US or in Europe. So it is quite fascinating for me that Heritage Guitars, for example, the original Gibson factory is technically owned by a Singaporean company under the overseas Chinese family, right? So it's quite fascinating for me. So what's the consequence of this? I think there are 2 or 3 consequences. One, I'll tell you about what happened in Singapore, but I'll tell you broader consequences. What happened in Singapore is Sweely, the company, the guitar retailer, they used to be the biggest Gibson stockist in Asia, or one of the biggest. I think the Japanese dealers have them beat. But as you remember, Gibson and Heritage had a little bit of a tiff, a little bit of a legal tiff. And because of that, Gibson, Sweely, which is also the company that owns Sweely, also owns Heritage Guitars, Sweely stopped stocking Gibson. I actually managed to take advantage of that because they had some old Gibson stock they needed to get rid of. And I got myself that slash double neck, the knocking on heaven's door guitar. So that's one way I took advantage of it. But essentially, they had the amazing Gibson stock, the Gibson Baritone Explorer that I showed you. And a bunch of other guitars that I bought and sold over the years, as Gibsons don't tend to stay too long with me. They were all sold to me by Sweely, and then now Sweely doesn't do it anymore. So that's one implication. Let's talk about the second implication. I actually think it's a very good thing. If there is one thing that Singaporean companies, or let me put it this, if Singapore has a certain brand equity in the world beyond Crazy Rich Asians and the crazy Marina Bay Sands and all the hotels and everything that you see, or the night race, the Formula One race, it is proper management. That is the USP of this country. That is the USP for someone like me who came here at the age of 18 and is still here 20 years later and am a minted citizen as of almost 10 years now. Proper management is a trademark of this particular culture that has been built in this little tiny island. And I'm so glad that certain aspects of the rock and roll, music, guitar-driven culture have come under the management of SED, of this particular part of the world. When I look at what they have done with Sweely, I look at it in 2 ways. As a guitarist, as a guitar fan, I'm very fond of it because they have completely revamped the brand. You have these amazing concept stores located next to the Singapore River. On the other side, I don't know how they're making money because the guitar market is only so large. So I don't understand the economics of it as a business person, but I love what they've done to it as a consumer. And from what I can see, ever since Heritage has come under the ownership of BandLab or Caldecott Music Group, I think there has been quite a renaissance of heritage guitars. You never saw heritage guitars in the conversation till about, I think, 2 or 3 years ago when these guys took over Heritage. So all in all, it's a great thing. I don't think you should fear the overseas Chinese ownership of these iconic American brands. This is a Singaporean company now. Singapore stands for amazing management. I know there is a lot of bad press globally because 25, 30 years ago, there was an American teenager who did some vandalism and then he got what is the word for it, caned. But I think that's a little bit overblown. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to see what they can do. I'm just hoping that you have more proper management taking over some of these iconic brands, being as customer focused, as consumer focused as these folks are. And I'm looking forward to see what they do next. And I'm hoping that they resolve their dispute with Gibson guitars so we can finally get some Gibson guitars here in Singapore. All right, I hope this was helpful. I would love to know what you think. I'd love to know whether this indeed told you about something you didn't know before. And let me know if you'd like me to cover any of these particular topics in detail next time. All right, I'll see you.